Okay, thanks everyone for coming today. I'll get started. There might be a few late turners up, but I'll get started anyway. So what I want to talk today about is a very common discussion that comes up when I've been talking to a lot of different service providers around the world, but especially in Europe, around how they move into providing cloud services and the concerns that they've got. And there's two chains of thought that we've seen, one of which is federation and one of which is differentiation. And as you'll see through this, I have a fairly opinionated view, but I welcome people to disagree with me and to discuss it afterwards, so please do. So what is cloud federation? We're going to talk over some of the business and operational challenges of cloud federation. What's actually better, in my view, about differentiation and how it's a better alternative for growth, both in terms of growing into cloud in general, but also growing the business there, and actually how to differentiate, and the next steps for the industry going forward. So what is federation? Not going to read the whole thing out because you can all read it faster than I can actually pronounce it anyway. But basically the concept of being able to move compute workloads magically whizzing around from this provider to this provider whenever something gets cheaper or makes more sense or latency or whatever it might be, magically being able to move them around. I'm the first to say this is a good idea. It does have potential. There's good things about why you should look at using federation. But there are a number of potential downsides to it that people don't always consider, both for the customer and for the service provider. So what are the business challenges with cloud federation? First of all, just check that hasn't skipped a slide. No, it hasn't. First of all, commoditization. One of the key facts, if you're going to be able to federate cloud work resources, then and have this magical swing from here to here with the workloads, you have to get to the lowest common denominator and ultimately provide a commoditized service because it's the only way you can do it. And much as providing a commoditized service makes a lot of sense for a lot of companies, for small service providers, hosters, anyone trying to grow into the cloud, providing a commoditized service immediately pushes you into competing on price, and you compete on price through economies of scale and cost of capital. And actually, that's not a great way to try and do these things. Mainly because if you've got people like Amazon and Google entering the market, then you're not really going to cope very well with the economies of scale against those guys. It doesn't matter if you're a 1 million, 10 million, 100 million pound business. When you've got $100 billion businesses competing in the same market, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And along with the commoditization becomes reduced functionality. Ultimately, people can't depend on whatever unique service you're offering based on if they want to be able to move that workload around. They're deliberately going to ignore it. They're not going to use it because of the fact that they want to move those workloads around. And that also creates the flip side of that is the compatibility, which is that if you want to deliver a commoditized service, then everything needs to be compatible in terms of moving the workloads, in terms of images, in terms of drivers, in terms of networks, how everything works. It can become a bit of a headache. It is possible, but it's not necessarily that easy. Finally, workload distribution. And what I mean by that is just because you can have your database server running on this cloud and your web servers running on this cloud, because it's cheaper to run your database over there because they charge less for IOPS or whatever it might be, doesn't mean your application is actually going to understand that and cope with that, especially if it's traditional internal applications where they're expecting the service to be running on the same network with sub 10 milliseconds latency. So just because you can do these things doesn't necessarily mean you should. But I will repeat again, this isn't an anti-federation point of view. It's more the fact that there's as many downsides to it as there are upsides. So it's something that you should look at carefully. And so for the service provider point of view, and again to the customers to a degree, there's a number of operational challenges with cloud federation as well. First of all, SLAs. Now, SLAs are a sore point when it comes to service providers in general, especially for the customers, because an SLA tends to be, oh, well, if we've completely broken your business for 3 days, we'll give you 20% of the money back. And that's an area that cloud in general need to actually think about, need to wise up to actually delivering enterprise applications. But can you imagine the complications with an SLA if you've got a contract with provider A, and then they've federated your workload partly to provider B and partly to provider C, and then C fails and you get an outage? Well, who's going to give you compensation? Who's your contract with? And the same issue comes up with support and responsiveness as well. If you've got a problem with provider C, do you contact them for support? Do you contact provider A, who then sends provider B an email, who then sends provider C an email? And it becomes a headache. And there is ways to overcome these, but they all become headaches. Quality of service. How exactly do you actually guarantee quality of service across different providers? From anything as simple as latency or bandwidth throughput or the disk I/O or whatever it might be. How can you be sure? And actually, I'm sure there's some people that would argue that's exactly where federation can come in handy, because if you don't like the performance you're getting from one company, move. But wouldn't it be better just to actually get guaranteed that performance in the first place? Federated billing, that's probably one of the hardest things to actually achieve here. If you've got provider A, B, C, D, and however many others in the mesh, and you're moving workloads between all of them, how on earth do you actually make sure you get a bill at the end of the month that actually makes sense, both for the service provider to know what they're billing directly, what they're rebilling, the margins they're making, retaining a margin on that area, because that's a very tricky problem to deal with. And last but certainly not least, legal jurisdiction. If you've got servers that are in the UK somewhere, and then they're federated with a provider that's in Germany, and a provider that's in Spain, and a provider that's in the US, awesome to be able to have the capability to actually deploy over all those different countries, absolutely. But then what if your data's in the US, and then it's in Germany, and then it's in Spain? Does that mean what happens when a customer's got a complaint against you or an abuse act occurs? Which company can you deal with that? Which company, what's their legal jurisdiction? What's your legal problems? You might be legally compliant in Germany, but you suddenly find your workload's running in the USA. And if you're doing a gambling app or something, for example, you're suddenly going to find yourself in extremely hot water. So potentially these are all overcomable, but they're all downsides that you should think about very carefully when it comes to using federated services. So we think for service providers, differentiation is a better alternative for growth. And the reasons behind, there's very simple reasons behind differentiation and why it's important are the three things ultimately: being able to acquire customers in the first place, being able to maintain high margins for those customers, and not losing them. Because ultimately, customers want the will to be able to move from provider X to provider Y to provider Z, but in practicality, that's not actually very rarely used. What they want to do is have a reliable and firm contract with a service provider they can trust and build a relationship with, and the service provider wants sticky revenue that isn't going to move away. So that's the three areas we think that are the key parts of why you need to differentiate and what that can actually enable. And of all the conversations I've been having with different service providers, one of their key concerns is basically, so we feel we're differentiated already. We've got our hosting business. We differentiate on a whole bunch of different things. But now we've got this cloud thing. Well, surely that's going to commoditize it. How can I continue to differentiate? And the good news is there's actually an awful lot of ways you can continue to differentiate, and you probably already are. And your customers want you to carry on doing these. And if done right, you can actually use cloud to enhance and improve these. And so you've got things like, the key for this is focus, and it's focusing on one thing, or one of few things. It's being the best that you can be at something in particular, and so that you become known for that. And so that focus might be on a particular industry. It might be that you only sell to marketing agencies, or to gaming companies, or to football clubs, or whatever it might be, but being known for solving solutions for a particular industry. It might be what's called vertical clouds, and that's similar to industry, but a little bit different in that you're building a cloud platform where the physical hardware, the setup, the infrastructure is built around a specific industry. So a great example of this is pharmaceuticals, or possibly gaming again, but pharmaceuticals, big data, high-performance computing, where your average cloud platform just can't deliver with the kind of things they're looking to do. The products that you actually offer on the cloud in terms of how it's built, how it's managed. Is it a managed cloud? Is it an unmanaged cloud? Do you offer pay-as-you-go? Do you offer monthly billing? There's a lot of ways that you can actually differentiate that actually allow customers to get exactly what they want. But the key is being able to do that and not be constrained, not think of cloud as being a wrapper that you get swallowed up in and you remove these capabilities, because you probably already sit and think, but I already do that. That's not a differentiator, but it might well actually be a differentiator for you. User experience is a huge one. As more and more people move to cloud, one of the things you'll find is what I call the App Store effect. More and more end users want to be empowered to get on with it themselves. They don't want IT getting in the way. They want to just be able to go and deploy infrastructure and normally deploy applications themselves. But as part of that, it's about making the user experience as easy as possible. And we have a term we use in product development internally called the email test, which is if you can't make your product as easy to use compared to the person wanting to do something to actually write you an email, say, do this for me, you haven't got a hope of them actually doing it themselves. You won't guarantee they will even then, but you've got to start somewhere. And so it's all about user experience, making it simple enough for the users that want something simple, but making it complex enough and powerful enough for those that want more complicated requirements. Similar to that, localization, and this might be localization geographically, localization by language, or even localization in terms of familiarity of how the service is branded and how it's presented. I was talking to one provider, for example, that has all their entire platform done in Spanish, and they're based in Spain, but they're actually attracting an awful lot of business from South America as well because of their customers who like seeing it in Spanish. Geography is an obvious one. People, much as the cloud is this big amorphous thing that no one cares where it is, in reality people do care about where it is, whether that's because of latency or legal jurisdiction or just where they feel comfortable with, and even language barriers. Being able to offer different cloud services in different countries is absolutely important, or wherever your customer base is. And these days, what you're finding more and more service providers that were traditionally single country are now suddenly thinking, well, actually, it makes sense for us to grow out. We can build small enough out. We've got a lot of customers asking us for resources in Amsterdam or Germany or the USA or whatever it might be. So being able to expand out into other geographies. And finally, and this is probably the biggest one of all, actually delivering applications. It's no good anymore, service providers, to just be able to go, here's some web hosting, here's a dedicated server, here's some rack space. As you have this consumerization of IT, more and more end users and their IT departments are looking to service providers to actually deliver the applications as well. Deliver them to begin with, support them even better if possible. So that's another key area of growth that people can look at, because just being able to provide slightly more bandwidth or slightly cheaper price is not a way of differentiating, because ultimately, if you try and compete on price, what I can guarantee you, unless your name's Amazon, Google, Microsoft, or HP or someone, you're going to lose out on that game eventually. So what are the next steps in doing this? What is the best advice I could give you? And this is what I tell all the customers that we go in and see. First of all, customers. Identify your existing customer base. And this is actually a surprising weakness of a lot of service providers. Identify who your customers are. Segment them into different target areas, into whether that might be industry or geography, but try and segment into who they actually are, understand them more. Understand their needs, understand what they need out of cloud. One of the most common things that I actually heard a number of companies say that I spoke to is, my customers aren't asking me for cloud. They don't need this. They're quite happy with what they've got. And then 6 months later, we have a conversation where they say, I'm losing all my customers to Amazon, but they didn't come and ask me. Well, you didn't ask them. It's your problem to go and ask them and find out what they actually want. Understand your strengths, your existing strengths in those areas. Where do you currently differentiate? What makes you different? What can you actually grow on? Sounds obvious, but we've seen some quite surprising results when people have really sat and thought about that. Understand how you can add distinct value into those specific customer segments that you think could benefit most from cloud. It's no point trying to magically come up with something that will be perfect for your entire customer base unless it's already very niche in the way it works. So take a small approach to begin with, get something working, get up and running and learn from it. We've seen so many people that have come up with this huge grand plan for rolling out cloud, and actually when they've spent millions of pounds rolling it out, it hasn't actually solved a problem for anyone at all because they've made it too generalized. So solve some problems, learn from it, build on it. And as a final point on that, adapt, basically. The key is you will learn. It's been an amazing learning experience. I've been involved in what you would call cloud now for 8 years. And the new use cases that have appeared, the new models that we've seen appear, some of which entire new businesses we've seen appear, you wouldn't have imagined. And so it will be a continual learning process for you. Okay, so quickly in summary, the status quo no longer works. Being able to sit there and basically say, well, I'm growing already is great, because one of the key things we hear from some service providers is, well, I'm growing more now than I was 5 years ago, because at the end of the 2000s, the hosting industry, the service provider industry had slowed down quite substantially in quite simple terms, because everyone that had a website or needed a website had one. Simplifying, but you get the general idea. And as part of that, a lot of hosters are now, and service providers are seeing more and more growth now, which is actually people moving workloads, moving applications out to service providers. And they're seeing this as new growth, and they're very happy with it because they're now growing 10% a year instead of 5% or whatever the numbers might be. But what they don't actually realize is it's a head-on collision between traditional hosting and enterprise IT looking to move out to the cloud. And you're getting all these new entrants coming in from multiple different directions. You're getting SIs that are looking at providing cloud services. The megaliths like the Googles and Amazons of this world, and the IBMs, and even the hardware manufacturers and the Dells of this world. So being able to sit there and think, great, I've got the same old contracts, I've got customers willing to sign up for 3 years or 5 years at a time, and sell the services in exactly the same way. It might work for you now. It's not going to work for you the next time those contracts come up for renewal. Federated services are an absolutely valid option, especially if you're looking at expansion, you're looking at ways to actually achieve greater reach or things like that, but it's not as clear-cut as it could be, and it's something that you should tread carefully on. It's potentially too challenging or too risky for service providers because of a number of the other issues that are involved in that area. And that differentiation, excuse me, through adding value and offering different services and adding distinct services is ultimately the long-term best solution for growth, because ultimately there is, right now with cloud, I know it's a bit of a buzzword, I'm fed up with the word myself, frankly, but it is an enormous opportunity for those that do it right, but there's also an enormous risk to those that do it wrong. It's what I was talking to an analyst earlier, and I said it's what I call the blockbuster moment, in that you could equally call it the Kodak moment. It's a dramatic change in an industry that those that aren't adapting to it will wither and die, whereas those that do actually adapt to it could actually grow and succeed significantly. So it's something really to watch out for. So that's me pretty much. I've got a few minutes for questions if anyone else wants to ask any. Just to say we've got another presentation. We've got another couple of presentations tomorrow. The future of data center automation. That's a bit of a product pitch, if I'm honest. It shows you a bit about what we've been up to and how we can hopefully help with this. And if you are looking at a reseller model, as I know a number of our customers are looking at more and more, we have a presentation specifically on how you can help grow your business through resellers. That's very much a commercial presentation, helping you understand some of the problems and pitfalls of that. And finally, if anyone does want to have a chat more, ask any questions, tell me I'm talking rubbish, then please do come by and see us at our stand 337. Thank you. Any questions at all? Nope. No one wants to disagree with me. It's always good. Okay, thank you, everyone.